Well, we are on a year-long journey into the story, God's story, from Genesis to Revelation. And today, we are at a very interesting point in the story. Today, we are at the roundabout. This is a relatively new introduction to the American traffic system. Quick survey. How many of you like the roundabout? Hands up. Okay, I love it. It's like NASCAR. You like lean into it, you know. I live at 55th and K7, and there's 3 in a row, and man, you should just watch me go. It's fun. Okay, how many of you hate the roundabout? Come on, right? It's like, didn't we win a revolution? We didn't want their king. Why would we take their roundabout? This is ridiculous. Are you tracking with me? This should be a part of the Tea Party platform. No roundabouts, you know? Well, interestingly enough, today we're at the point in the story where the roundabout is a central feature. At this point in the journey, God has delivered his people from 400 years of slavery. There have been 10 plagues. He parts the Red Sea. So now they're going from rags to riches. They're going from slavery to freedom. They're going to go from Egypt to the Promised Land, but they don't go the direct route. They go to the roundabout way. And here's the scripture. Pull out your notes. Let's look at this together. This describes their journey. If you did your pre-reading this week, it's the chapter that was called The Wandering. And here's Exodus 13 from that section of the story. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God thought, if the people face war, they may change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people by the, what does it say? Roundabout way. Underline that. The roundabout way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea. Now here's what's interesting. There was actually a direct route that would have went, and let me change the color of that so it's a little bit better. There we go. There was a direct route that went from Egypt to Canaan. It was well established. It was a caravan. It was called the Way of the Sea. It was this straight shot about 200 miles. In the Hebrew, it was called the I-70. East-west route, right? And what's funny is, you know, if this was Kansas City, all right, over here, about 250 miles, what do you have? Tell me, what is it? St. Louis, right? The land flowing with milk and honey. That's what St. Louis is. And that's all the Israelites had to do. It was actually a relatively short journey, but God didn't lead them that way. He said they weren't ready. So he took them on a roundabout. It was designed to be about a year or so, where he took them down this way toward Mount Sinai, and they would spend a year there. This was a part of God's plan for Israel. And then they would go up this route all the way up to where the Promised Land was. And it was going to be a year on the roundabout. And during that year, he was going to provide for them miraculously in the desert. He was going to give them unbelievable revelation about who he is. It was going to be a year of detox. For 400 years, they've been told, all you are is a product of Egypt. All you are brickmakers. And God was going to help them discover their identity as his people, as his beloved. He was going to help them understand what it would be to be a free people and a nation, not built on oppressive, corruptive power, but on generosity and equity and justice. And it was going to take a year. And that's a lot to get done in a year, isn't it? But God was able to do it. But because Israel's a lot like me and maybe a lot like you, they're a little slow, a little hard-hearted, thick skulls. And you know what happened is what was meant to be about a year on the roundabout, because of their pride and exalting self above God, it ended up becoming a time where they went round and round and round and round. How many years? 40. Round and round. I'm going to have to do 40 of these, get comfortable. Round and round and round. I lost track. I'll have to start over again. Here we go. Round and round and round. Right? How many years? 40 years on the roundabout. Talk about getting dizzy. 40 years in the wilderness. And when you get to be about 40 years old, you know what you realize? Write this down. Everybody does wilderness time. Everybody does wilderness time. Time in the desert where it just is so hot and the earth is scorched and you don't know if you can make it another day. And it's like your stomach is growling and your throat, you're just dying for a drink of water, but there isn't anything but the beating sun and the hard scorched earth. And you don't know if you can go on another step. Wilderness time. Lots of times it's triggered by a life event. A relationship is shattered. Someone you thought you'd be with forever looks at you and says, I don't love you anymore. Or there's somebody else. Sometimes it's abuse. And you thought it was going to be behind you and you were trying to forget about it, but now you're realizing it's like the controlling narrative of your whole life and it's just crushing you. Sometimes it's a diagnosis and you were hoping for something else, but the doctor said it was cancer or it was fill in the blank, and now you realize you're just going to be fighting for your life. Sometimes it's a child rebels and you're watching them make a series of choices that are absolutely devastating you because you know where this is headed. Sometimes it's financial ruin. You're fired, you're outsourced, you're downsized. And what you thought was secure and reliable is no longer secure and reliable, but totally unpredictable. And suddenly life is a wilderness. You know, I'm 45 and I can look back and say I've had 3 wilderness times, and the last one was almost 4 years ago, and it was by far the deepest, hottest, most difficult time in the wilderness for me. And it was triggered by a life event. The church that I was pastoring, one of the other pastors had a terrible moral failure that revealed actually a whole nother life. And it was the kind of failure that it looked like it was going to land him in jail and put us on the front page of the newspaper. Total upheaval, total betrayal, all this doubt, like how could we have missed this? And there's just this chaos where so many people are hurt and wounded and disillusioned. And I'm hurt and wounded and disillusioned. And then this person had tremendous capabilities and tons of responsibilities. So not only are we trying to work through the chaos and the grieving and the legal issues, you know, it's also like all this work this person was doing, someone's got to do it. Oh, I guess it's me. And that was the first of, over the next 2 years, just a series of life events that just, it got harder and harder and harder. And I got to the point where I was so depressed that there were days where I was totally just non-functional. And I don't need to share the list of all these events because everybody in this room has a list like that. But I got to the point where I remember one night I'm walking, it was late at night, it was cold in the winter, and I just felt like I felt like I was going crazy actually. And I remember walking down the side of this road, and I was walking on the berm, and this car was coming the other direction on this lonely country road, and I remember thinking to myself, I wish that car would just swerve left. It would be easier. And I realized it's like I wanted to die. And I doubted like everything I believed in. And I remember going home that night and putting my head on Michelle's lap, and I just broke down weeping, like uncontrollably. I'm not given to that. And I just realized I'm not strong enough. I'm not able. I can't do this. I don't know what to do next. And you know what made it even a little bit more complex? And I'm not trying to have a pity party, but like being a pastor actually made it more complex because people are counting on you for spiritual guidance. And I was at this place where it's like, you know, hey, if you're looking for spiritual guidance, good luck with that. Like, go talk to Joel Osteen or something. He'll give you a smile. That'll be fine. I got nothing for you, you know? And literally, it's at the point where I'm like, maybe I should quit. Because what good am I? And some of you, that's where you're at. And let me just say this. You're either been through the wilderness and come out of it, right? Or you're in the middle of the wilderness right now. Or guess what? You're heading into a wilderness. It's going to come. It's going to happen. Everybody does time in the wilderness. And that's what's beautiful about the story, the capital S story we're going through. It's all of our stories. Yes, it's happened, but it's still happening. And in this part of the story, God is trying to help us see through the story of Israelites' wilderness wandering. What do you do when you have problems you can't solve? What do you do when day after day it's scorched earth? And what we're going to look at today, write this down. Here's the big idea. In the wilderness, like Israel, we face three choices that profoundly shape our character and our course. Everybody faces these choices in the wilderness, and they will define our future. They are profoundly important. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to follow the Israelites on their journey. There's basically three waypoints in this journey, and each one of them, there's a choice that they come up against that will define their character and set their course. We face these same choices. They're profoundly important. And the first one happens when they are in the wilderness of Sinai. Okay, so they've crossed the Red Sea, and it would make sense to make the straight shot, but God says, take a hard right. And they go south, and they go to Mount Sinai. And the first snippet of this story we're going to look at when they're in the wilderness of Sinai, before they actually get to Mount Sinai. Look at it. It's in your notes. This is from Exodus 16. It says, the whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. On the 15th day of the second month, so they're about 6 weeks into this, after they had come out of Egypt, in the desert, the whole community, what does it say? Grumbled. Underline that. They grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. Listen to the way they describe slavery. There we sat around. We ate pots of meat. There's like pots of meat everywhere when you're a slave, you know? And we ate all the food we wanted. But you brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. So they're like, being a slave was so great. And it says they grumbled. In the Pentateuch, that's the first 5 books of the story of the Bible. It says 11 times the Israelites are described as grumbling. And grumbling, both in the English and in the Hebrew, it's an onomatopoeia. In other words, it's a word that sounds like what it is. So just think about the word grumble, 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 grumble. Come on, let's do it. Come on. Grumble, 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 grumble. It just sounds wicked, doesn't it? Grumble, grumble, grumble. And we tend to think of grumbling as like, what's wrong with a little whining? Like we tend to think about it as sort of a surface complaint. And when I'm grumbling, I am totally justified. You, on the other hand, you're a wuss, right? You got to buck up. But me, this is totally justified. And the issue with grumbling is this, it becomes this pattern for Israel that actually reveals something that goes way deeper than a surface complaint, because life is extraordinarily difficult in the wilderness. But it shows something about a posture of their soul. And here's what grumbling is at the deepest level. Write this down. Grumbling is forgetting who God is and what he's done. And gratitude is remembering who God is and what he's done. Let that sink in for a moment. Grumbling is when I let my default filter for life be one where I'm forgetting who God is and I'm overlooking what he's done. Gratitude is when my intentional focus is remembering who God is and what he's done. And listen, when you are in the wilderness, like when I was in my wilderness, it involves tremendous loss. And when human beings face loss, it is necessary and important to grieve the loss. There are stages to grieving. And if you don't grieve, then you're going to get stuck and you're going to get frozen. So I'm not saying you shouldn't grieve. You absolutely need to grieve. But there's a difference between grieving and grumbling. And grumbling is when I begin to let the suffering narrow my field of vision, okay? And there's like 2 lists. There's the list of ways that every day I am receiving gifts and goodness. Like, for example, everyone just take a breath with me. Come on. Just hold it. And then let it out. Cleansing breath, serenity now. Now, guess what? You're going to get 23,000 of those today. You didn't pay for a single one. Every single one's a gift. And literally, there are thousands of ways every day where there is goodness around us. And it's really easy to miss it. You know, the pleasant smell of a cup of coffee in the morning. The palette of colors at night when the sunset's going down. Kansas skies, they're the best. Maybe the laugh of your child. See, but what happens in the wilderness when we let the grumbling take over, rather than seeing the list of thousands of things that are good, we begin to fixate on what? The list of things I do not have. And my field of vision begins to narrow down to that list of the things I do not have. And when we let that become our default setting, what it does is it begins to shrink us. It begins to make our heart colder and harder. And literally, your quality of life in the wilderness comes down to this choice. I remember reading a story probably 15 years ago. It was an interview, actually, with a guy named W. Mitchell. And this is one of those stories that just has stayed with me year after year after year. He was in his 40s, extraordinarily successful entrepreneur. He got his Harley. He bought his hog. He was out on a road trip. Was in a terrible accident with a tanker truck, and it ended up 90% of his body, second and third degree burns. Can you imagine what it would be like to be in a fire and your skin is literally burning? So it was literally years of rehabilitation and surgeries, and he came through that and actually jump-started his business again. And he was in a private jet with 8 of his best customers, mechanical failure, crash landing. Everybody else walks away. He's paralyzed from the neck down. And in this interview, he said something that I'll never forget. He said, before my injuries, there were 10,000 things I could do. After my injuries, there were only 5,000 things I could do. I could choose to focus on the 5,000 I couldn't do anymore, or I could choose to focus on the 5,000 things I can still do. Wow. There's a man who's chosen to remember gratitude in the wilderness. So here's choice number 1, write it down. When we wander, we have a choice to be overcome with grumbling or to remember gratitude. And the grumbling heart will become numb, discontent, judgmental, dissatisfied. And the grateful heart can actually become more alive, more content, more joy-filled, more filled with wonder, even in the wilderness. And it's a choice that we make every day. So let's go to the next waypoint. The next section of the journey, they're going to end up at Mount Sinai. And at Mount Sinai, they're going to spend a year. And what happens here, it's remarkable. They renew the covenant with God. Remember back in Genesis 12? God's redemption plan began. He picked Abraham and Sarah. And he said, I want to form through you a nation of people that will join me in healing this sin-sick world. I will bless you, and you will be a blessing to all nations. Well, that covenant now is being renewed. Israel is being formed again into this nation of free people, and it happens through the 10 Commandments. That's sort of this clarity point and what the covenant's going to mean. He's showing them through the 10 Commandments what it means to be a just and generous and humane society that would set them apart from the other nations of the world. And God gives them the 10 Commandments at the top of Mount Sinai in this cloud of fire and thunder. But here's the amazing thing. The people of Israel respond and they say, yes, we're in, when Moses brings the 10 Commandments down. And then God says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come down the mountain and I'm going to be among you and I'm going to guide you. A pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And at the tabernacle, this will be a place of meeting. In other words, I'm giving you the best gift I can give you, my presence. I'm going to come down and live in the middle of the camp. Now get this, because this will help you remember who God is. One of the things that's unique about the Jewish tradition that set it apart from all the other polytheistic worldviews at that point in time was God was not watching from a distance, looking down on them like they were rats in a maze. He literally said, I am coming down into the wilderness with you. Did you hear me? I'm not going to stand up on top of this mountain. No, I'm coming down, and we are going through the wilderness together. And in the middle of this, I'm going to give you daily bread. It's this miraculous substance called what? Do you remember? Manna. In the Hebrew, it literally means, what is it? It's a question. It's like, we don't even know what this is. It's some kind of weird Wonder Bread that shows up every morning. And it says it was really flexible. Remember in Forrest Gump where he's talking about all the different ways you can make shrimp? Right? Manna was like that. It actually says like you could bake it, you could boil it, you could have manna on a stick, you could have manicotti, manna banana cream pie. Pastor jokes, I apologize. And they were invited to eat this manna. And it was a reminder that I am with you. And in this Jewish tradition, there's this idea of going into the wilderness and that we can take hold of our wilderness suffering and it can be transformed. And God says, I am with you in the pain and in the suffering. And that pillar of cloud by day and fire by night, you know what it is? It's a foreshadowing, it's a vector, it's an arrow pointing towards Jesus. God with us, Emmanuel. God came in flesh and blood. And when Jesus began his ministry, what was the first thing he did? Do you remember where he went? Where did he go? You tell me. He went into the wilderness. In every piece of scorched earth you walk, he walks with you. And you know what the epitome of the wilderness is? Jesus on the cross. God stands in solidarity with you in your suffering. Literally, the entirety of human sin and suffering, Jesus plunged himself into it on the cross. So when you suffer, when you walk in the wilderness, look at the cross and know that God is with you in the sense of abandonment. He is with you in the suffering. He is with you in the blood and the sweat and the pain and the tears of it. He is with you. And on the other side of the cross, what was there? A resurrection. A promise of this old life that can be redeemed and a new life that can be born. All of that is promised here in the tabernacle. And God made his home in the middle of the camp, and God is with you in the middle of your suffering. And so after Sinai, they march out, and they are in the wilderness of Paran. And they're just a few days out into this wilderness after a year of Mount Sinai, a year of detox. And again, the grumbling starts, the complaining starts. Parents, let me ask you, what's the most often asked question when you are on a long road trip? Are we there yet? And let me ask you, when you're on a long road trip, is there a higher probability of arguments with siblings in the back seat, yes or no? Yes. So guess what happens? The siblings start fighting. Moses has a brother, Aaron, and a sister, Miriam. And they actually start leading an insurrection. They want to be in charge. And Miriam, in particular, wants to be in charge. She's like, why is Moses the only one who gets to make any of these decisions? He's my punk brother. And what's fascinating is, like, Miriam here was like Moses' biggest fan. When they came across through the Red Sea, she was actually a prophetess. She was a poet. She stands up and she actually had this extemporaneous song that burst out of her. It's called the Song of the Sea. And in other words, she was like the head worship leader for Israel. She was like Chris Tomlin meets Hillsong. And like her song, everybody was singing it. It was a big hit. But you know what? Over here, just a year later, something's changed. The wilderness has changed her. And I'm telling you, number one, everybody goes through the wilderness. Number two, you do not go through the wilderness without being changed. It will change you. And either it will turn you into a smaller, more atrophied, shrunken version of yourself, or you will allow God to redeem it and transform it and bring you into a new way of life. Actually, you become more beautiful. You become the kind of person God had in mind when he thought you up. And you know what happened? Because Miriam chose to look to assign blame, She's like, Moses is an idiot, right? She went the pathway of bitterness. And actually her name, Miriam, it means bitter. It comes from the root word mar, which means bitter. And that is one choice in the wilderness. You become increasingly bitter. Write this down. When we wander, we have a choice to become bitter or to become better. Now, let me just say this. I think what happens is this. Look at Exodus 14. They said to Moses, why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? Why did you make us leave Egypt? Circle those words, why. And here it is. The why question appears, get this, 8 times in the wandering narrative. And I've spent enough time in the wilderness and with people who've walked through the wilderness where I've realized the people that get stuck on bitter, you know what often happens? They get stuck at the why question. Now, don't misunderstand me. Asking the why question is very important. The why question is about past and causal, right? So I'm reflecting on the past and I'm asking, why? What caused this? Why did this happen? This is important and necessary. Even Jesus, what was the first thing he said when he was hanging on the cross? Do you remember what it was? Why? Why, God, have you forsaken me? So we all have to go into the struggle of why. But here's what happens. It's just a caution. What happens is the why can become a stop sign, and it becomes the paralysis of analysis. And you just get stuck in this loop of blame and jealousy and hatred. And guess what? We don't ever really get the full answer to why. Not in this lifetime. Let me say this. The people I know who are the most beautiful people, I'm talking about their character. I mean, the most loving, gracious, wise, compassionate people to a person, they are the people I know who have suffered the most. And they didn't get stuck at the why question. They wrestled with the why question, but they went on to another question. Because do you remember what Jesus said, his last words? He said, into your hands I commit my spirit. And you know what that question is? That's the what's next question. You can write that down. In the wilderness, Jesus is inviting you into the what's next question. And every person who's come through the wilderness and become better, they ask the what's next question. What's my next step towards healing? What's my next step towards making amends? What is my next step towards wholeness? Jesus, what is my next step? Into your hands I commit my spirit. We all have to go through the struggle of the why question, but then there's this surrender question that says, okay, God, now take hold of this, take hold of me, and transform this and redeem it. And that leads to the next choice. So here's the journey. They start at the Red Sea. They go down to Sinai. They're going up through the wilderness of Paran. And then they end up here, right on the border of the Promised Land. And guess what? Because of grumbling, because of bitter, there's another insurrection. At that point in time, Moses had sent some spies across into the Promised Land to get some recon. 2 of the spies come back, Joshua and Caleb. And again, you'll be reading about Joshua this next week. So go ahead and read all about his life. They come back with this faith-filled report. They're saying, God has given us this land. It's amazing. And God can do this. But then the other 10 spies come back. And they're like, Joshua and Caleb are nuts. We've been there. The people there, they're like Shaquille O'Neal meets The Rock. They have ninja skills. We're dead. And another insurrection starts. And they say, you know what? Moses is an idiot. We need a new leader. And guess where they want to go back to? Egypt. So God is saying, I literally want to lead you to good. I want to lead you to better. I want to lead you to Promised Land. But they said, no, we're not going. And you know what God does? He honors their choice. He honors their choice. God just wanted to take them on a year roundabout to develop them, to detox them, to transform them, to free them up, to protect them from barbaric nations that would have destroyed them, and to make them into a nation of free people who can bless other people. And they're like, no, we don't want this. And so God honors their choice. And you know what? They end up wandering for 40 years. And see, here's the choice. When we wander, we have a choice to waste our wilderness time or let God recycle our wilderness time, and God will honor our choice. And see, if we choose to waste our wilderness, you know what happens? We extend our wilderness. And because Israel chose to waste their wilderness time, they extended it by a factor of 40. Are you listening to me? Please don't extend your wilderness time. And you get to choose. And God will honor your choice. And here's the amazing thing. Even in Israel's self-chosen extension of the wilderness, God was with them. He was loving them. He was feeding them. He was providing for the manna and quail. He was literally renewing the clothes that were hanging on their back. He was protecting them from barbaric nations. And listen to me, no matter what pathway you choose, if you choose grumbling and you choose bitter, guess what? God loves you. He's for you. He's inviting you to come to him. But here's the choice that you have. He can take your wilderness time. He can take your pain and he can recycle it and he can redeem it. I'm not saying that what happened to you was good, but God can bring good out of it. And what was this crap? God can actually turn it into fertilizer. And actually something new can bloom and grow inside of you and out of you. And not only will you eat the fruit of it, you'll actually be able to share it with others. And here's one of the most hopeful passages in the Bible. Paul says this to the church of Corinth. He comforts us when we are in trouble so that we can share the same comfort with others in trouble. We do share in the terrible sufferings of Christ, but also in the wonderful comfort he gives. In other words, who better can help somebody who's going through a divorce than who? The person who's been through a divorce. And God's walked with them. And they've come out better. And they've come out grateful, believe it or not. Who better to help a person who's been through some kind of horrible abuse in their childhood than someone who's been through it? And God is healing them, and they can share that healing. So God can not only bend it for your better, but also for the better of somebody else. And you know what? Your deepest pain in Jesus' hands becomes your area of greatest impact in the lives of others. And so we all go through wilderness time. And we get to choose. We can go through and it can be grumbling, and it can be bitter, and it can be waste. Or we choose, and gratitude grows, and better grows, and redemption grows. And the whole way through the wilderness, God was their source. He was giving them manna every day. It was their sustenance. It was their life. It was this reminder that I am with you and I am your source, even in the wilderness of love and life and goodness. And Jesus, 1,400 years later, talks about this manna. Listen to his words. Our ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, as it was written. He gave them bread from heaven to eat. And Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is the bread that comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. And sir, they said, give us this bread. Then Jesus declared, let's read it out loud together, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry. Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. So today we're going to come to the table. and we're going to receive again the bread of life. So we won't be hungry, even in the wilderness. And we're going to drink the cup so we're not thirsty, even in the wilderness. And I want to ask you, if you just bow your heads with me for a moment and close your eyes. And just quietly prepare your hearts to come and to eat the manna, to eat the daily bread, to meet with Jesus, who is present with you right here, right now, even in your wilderness. We're going to sing together now. And I want to invite you to come to the table. And as you come, you'll be reminded, this is the body of Christ broken for you. Take and eat. This is the blood of Jesus shed for you. Take and drink. And you can exit to your left and come forward to one of these stations here on the floor, and then return to your right. Up in the balcony section, you can just come out the nearest aisle, and the deacons will serve you at a station that's closest to you. And I want to ask, as you come, you can come with a prayer and say, God, give me the gift of gratitude. Help me to remember who you are and what you've done. You can come with your prayer and say, God, give me better. Take hold with me this wilderness time, and let's, God, together transform it into a new life and a new freedom. And you can come and you can say, God, take hold of this wilderness. Take hold of me. Don't let me waste this, Lord, but recycle it, redeem it for good in my life and good for others. And then take it and eat it. Eat your daily bread. With that said, you're invited to the table to come, and we'll sing together as we do.
You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies, till all my fears are gone. I'm no longer a slave fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave fear. I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. Oh, you split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship his holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. I'll worship your holy name.
The sun comes up, it's a new day dawning. It's time to sing your song again. Whatever may pass and whatever lies before me, let me be singing when the evening comes.
Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship his holy name. Yes, sing like never before, oh my soul. I worship your holy name.
You're rich in love and you're slow to anger. Your name is great and your heart is kind. For all your goodness I will keep on singing. 10,000 reasons for my heart to find.
Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship his holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. I worship your holy name. Bless the Lord, oh my soul. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. Oh, you split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears are drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. Yes, Lord, you split the seas. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears are drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. Oh Lord, I am a child of God.
The body of Christ, our daily bread, and the blood of Jesus. Take and eat. Here's the thing about this meal. you can take it with you. And every day, he's with you in the wilderness. He's your daily bread. And I want to ask you to leave today with that question, what's next, Jesus? For some of you, it might be helpful for you to know that this is a community where you can find help. We have groups, for example, they're called Lifelines. And if you're in a season of life where you feel stuck with a hurt or a habit or a hang-up, there's lots of different types of these groups dealing with really specific issues. It might be addiction, or it might be grieving, or it might be divorce. Those are open, and you could step into a community of people that would journey with you in the wilderness. If you're interested in that, you can stop at the Connection Center on the way out. They'd love to help you find your way there. Also, for some of us, our next step, it's time to be baptized. And we're having baptism March the 6th. And baptism goes all the way back to the Red Sea. It's a symbol of going through the waters of death and coming out with a new life. And Jesus anchored that imagery to his death and his resurrection. And for you, right now, some of you, God is prompting you. This is your moment to make that declaration. This is your time to go public with your faith. And we'd love to help you with that. You can sign up online, or again, stop at the Connection Center on the way out. And also, we're a family that prays together. And members from the prayer team, they'd be here and they'd love to pray with you. If you'd like to just have your hurt, your wound, your issue lifted up, you don't have to stand alone. So I invite you to come. With that said, let me say this. May this week you choose gratitude over grumbling. May this week you choose better over bitter. And may this week, may you join God in the redemption of your wilderness and not waste your pain. Go in the grace and the peace of Jesus Christ. And all God's people said, amen.